Hey there. I wanted to share this odd and kind of eerie thing that happened to me. I really feel like it might have kept me out of serious trouble. Back in 2017, I was diving deep into online dating. I'd been single for about a year since my last boyfriend just up and left, moving across the country without so much as a warning. I was left pretty heartbroken and lonely, especially since we had been living together. After months of wallowing, I decided it was time to meet someone new. So I threw myself into dating apps, signing up for anything that was free or didn't cost a ton. That's when I came across this guy named Justin. Justin was the first to send me a message, and it was surprisingly normal. "Hi there. I'd like to get to know you better." I remember it because it wasn't one of those desperate messages you often get on dating apps. You know, the ones where they call you gorgeous and beg for a response, maybe even toss in something inappropriate. His profile was interesting too. He was pretty attractive, if I'm being honest. He had a shaved head, an average build, and in his photo, he was wearing sunglasses and had his arm around a dog. Funny enough, he kind of reminded me of my ex. Maybe that was a red flag, but I ignored it and replied to him. We started chatting, and there was a lot of back and forth. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. He asked a ton of questions about my life, my interests, and everything in between. He was also pretty open about himself and sent me a few more pictures of him with his dog. He hinted at meeting up, but I wasn't quite ready. Plus, I didn't want to give off the wrong vibe, like I was just looking for a fling, which is super common on these sites. He was cool about it, didn't push, which was a big plus in my book. Then, one evening, I was in a particularly bad mood. Out of the blue, he texted me about a local fair that was going on nearby. I made a joke about how it had been ages since I'd gone to a fair, and he was shocked. He told me this one was the best in the state and insisted I had to check it out. Then he offered to take me. I figured, why not? Going to a fair for a first date was definitely different, but I liked the idea. It was a chance to dress casually, have some fun, and maybe dodge those awkward silences. We met up that Saturday night at the fair, and he looked just like his pictures, so that was a relief. He greeted me with a hug, and it was honestly nice. I was already in a good mood and curious to see how the night would unfold. We went on a few rides, played some games, and joked about how rigged they probably were, even tried to guess how they pulled off the tricks. We also tried out a bunch of different food stalls, and everything was delicious. As we wandered around, waiting for a show to start, we ended up in this section of the fair called something like Oddities and Curiosities. Or maybe it was Wonders and Weirdness. I can't quite remember. Anyway, that's where we saw this guy playing an instrument with his feet, and a woman juggling knives like it was no big deal. There was even a tent for a fortune teller. Yeah, I know, it's cheesy, but I'm really into that stuff. I love tarot, crystals, all of it. One of my closest friends actually reads my tarot cards and tea leaves pretty often. I wouldn't say I'm a total believer, but I've had a few experiences I couldn't quite explain, so I'm open to the possibility that there's something to it. When I spotted the fortune teller's tent, I definitely wanted to check it out. I thought it'd be fun to see what she might say. Maybe even get her take on how compatible Justin and I were. He didn't seem to mind, and even seemed a bit curious himself, so we headed inside. The fortune teller greeted us, introduced herself as Madame Rose, and asked what we were interested in. Justin just shrugged with a smile and asked what she would recommend. She guessed right away that this was our first date, and I confirmed with a grin. It felt like a good sign. Madame Rose suggested doing a palm reading to see our compatibility, and maybe even glimpse into our future, so we agreed. We both sat down across from her, and she started with my palm. She mentioned right away that she could sense I was still carrying sadness from a past loss. She wasn't wrong. I was still pretty messed up over my ex. Then she moved on to Justin's palm, and that's when the vibe in the room shifted. Her eyes widened, and she quickly told him that she sensed a lot of anger inside him, and that he needed to deal with it before he hurt someone he cared about. Justin looked puzzled and didn't say a word, but I could tell something was off with Madame Rose. She grabbed both our hands, and her expression turned dark. "No, this will never work," she said, like she was scolding us. We both stared at her, confused. And then she went on, "You, sir, are a dangerous man. You've hurt everyone you've loved, and it's going to happen again." Justin jerked his hand away, a mix of confusion and anger on his face. I stayed put, too curious to see what else she might say. She kept talking, saying that if I didn't get away from him soon, I'd end up hurt. She said she saw bruises covering my skin and gripped my hand tight, her eyes full of fear. "You have to get out before it's too late," she warned, then let go of me. That's when Justin lost it. He started yelling, asking who she thought she was, accusing her of being part of some kind of setup, like someone had paid her to mess with our date. I can't remember her name, but I'm pretty sure it was a woman. Maybe an ex of his? I never got the full story. Anyway, he kept insisting that he didn't know her, but she claimed he had already shown her enough. He called her nuts, said he never believed in this stuff, then grabbed my hand and pulled me out of the tent. I was too shocked and confused to resist. Once we were outside, he started rambling about how people like that are just out to scam you and take your money. He laughed, trying to shake off the tension, but I couldn't just let it go that easily. We went to the show we'd planned to see, but I was completely distracted, my mind stuck on what the fortune teller had said. Justin kept asking if I was okay, but I just nodded, not wanting to get into it. After the show, he suggested we check out something else at the fair, but I told him I was ready to head home. I could tell he was a bit annoyed by that. We had already seen most of the fair, so I wasn't sure what else he was expecting to do. Then he asked, "This isn't because of that fortune teller, is it? You don't actually believe in that garbage, do you?" His tone was sharp, almost accusing, and it made me uneasy. I forced a laugh and told him no, that I was just tired. It was already past 11 p.m., and I joked that I wasn't used to staying out so late. That seemed to calm him down a bit. He hugged me, said he'd talk to me soon, and we went our separate ways. But on the drive home, my heart was pounding. I kept telling myself that fortune tellers can't really see the future. Was she just jealous, or maybe part of some weird setup? But it was Justin's reaction that really freaked me out. The way he got so defensive and angry was unsettling. I knew if I kept seeing him, I'd have to be really careful. The next day, Justin messaged me, asking how I was and if I wanted to grab dinner that evening. I figured maybe I was overreacting and should give him another chance. Since we'd be in a public place, I thought I could get a better read on him without being influenced by what Madame Rose said. So, I agreed. We went to a nearby restaurant and everything seemed totally normal. We had a decent conversation. His mood was fine, nothing out of the ordinary. It was just a regular date, and I started to think I had blown things out of proportion. By the end of the night, I was feeling relaxed again, laughing and enjoying myself. After dinner, we walked out together, and he followed me to my car, which I thought was just him being polite. But then he got really close, too close. Under different circumstances, it might have felt romantic, but something about it made me nervous. The conversation hit a lull, so I thanked him for dinner and moved to unlock my car. That's when his whole demeanor changed. He suddenly snapped, saying, "So, that's it?" I turned to him, confused, not understanding what he meant. He started making snide comments about how I'd gotten a free meal and he hadn't gotten anything in return. I was taken aback and asked what he meant by that because I had definitely offered to pay my share, but he insisted on covering the bill. Then he mentioned coming back to my place, and I turned him down flat. I reminded him, like I did before we even met, that I wasn't interested in anything like that, and he wasn't going to get what he wanted after just 2 dates. That's when he lost it. He started yelling, demanding to know what was wrong with him and why I was rejecting him. As he got louder and more aggressive, I quickly jumped into my car and locked the doors. He stormed over and kicked my car so hard it shook. By this point, people nearby were starting to notice, so I took my chance and sped off. I didn't go straight home, though. I drove around for a while to make sure he wasn't following me. When I finally felt safe, I headed back to my apartment and locked myself inside. He kept calling over and over, but I didn't answer. He left a bunch of mixed-up voicemails and texts, swinging from apologizing to angrily blaming me. I just turned off my phone and tried to sleep. The next day, I called my friend, the one who does tarot readings, and asked her to do a reading about Justin and what the future might hold for us. I didn't mention anything about what Madame Rose had said at the fair. Only my mom knew about that, and I hadn't told anyone else. So when my friend's reading came back with something eerily similar, I got seriously freaked out. I finally told her what had happened at the fair, and she agreed that I needed to cut ties with him immediately. She said something bad was going to happen if I didn't. So, that same day, I sent Justin a message saying I didn't think things were going to work out between us and that it was over. He bombarded me with texts, begging for another chance, then quickly switching to insulting me. He even threw in a threat at the end. I replied that I'd be going to the police if he kept it up, and after that, he went silent. I didn't hear from him again, thankfully, but for a while, I couldn't shake the fear. He lived in the next town over, so he wasn't exactly close, but not far enough to feel completely safe. I was paranoid I'd run into him at a grocery store or a coffee shop. I avoided the restaurant we'd gone to unless I was with friends, just in case he showed up. Looking back, I feel like I dodged a bullet. I don't know what his past was like or what he might have done, but sometimes I wonder. I thought about trying to find an ex of his to see if she had any stories, but honestly, I was too scared of what I might uncover, so I just let it go. All I know is that going to that fair was both the best and the worst date I've ever been on. And I can't help but be grateful to Madame Rose for maybe, just maybe, saving my life. I'm sorry if this drags on a bit, but it was a pretty intense experience for me. Back in the day, I used to be really into MMOs, spending countless hours lost in those virtual worlds. I even got a few friends into it, and we'd hang out in-game, chatting while playing. I met a ton of people through those games, some of whom I became quite close with, despite the distance. Unfortunately, this story takes place around that time. One night, I was playing solo when someone started asking about a specific game mechanic in the server chat. Nobody was replying, and I felt a bit sorry for them, so I stepped in with the answer. They were super grateful and thanked me repeatedly. After that, we started chatting about the game, and then other games we liked. They tried to get some personal details out of me, but I kept it vague, just saying that I was 21 and lived somewhere in Canada, which was true. Their character was a female, and yeah, I know anyone could be behind that avatar, but for some reason, I didn't think twice about it. I guess part of me felt like I should support another female gamer. As we talked more, she told me her real name was Amanda, and she was also 21 and from Canada. We started chatting more often, and I even gave her my email so we could talk outside the game. Amanda picked up the game quickly, asking a few questions here and there, but she was a fast learner. We soon became a solid duo, tackling tough quests together and kicking butt. I tried to get her to join my friends group so we could all play together, but she always said no, explaining that she was too shy and preferred it being just the two of us. But she didn't mind if I played with my other friends while she wasn't around. This went on for about 3 months, and we also started emailing each other a lot. She even sent me a photo of herself holding a sign with my username on it, saying, "Hello." I didn't think anything of it. She seemed genuine, so I sent her a similar picture of myself. Our friendship deepened from there. We started sharing more about our lives, our favorite things, our fears, our dreams, and even our frustrations. Some might call me naive, but I began to develop feelings for Amanda. After all those pictures and conversations, I realized how much we had in common. One day, I was comforting her after she told me about a rough day she'd had, how she was feeling down on herself, and how worthless she felt. While trying to comfort her, I blurted out that I loved her and assured her she was important, that I needed her in my life. I wasn't even sure if I meant it in a romantic way or just as a friend, but at that moment, it felt like the right thing to say. To my surprise, she admitted she felt the same but had been too scared to tell me, worried about how I'd react and not wanting to lose me. That night changed everything between us. Our relationship took off, and I shared the news with my friends. Most of them were happy for me, but one of them, Ryan, was skeptical. He pointed out that despite all the pictures we'd exchanged, I hadn't actually heard her voice or seen her on video. He thought it was odd that we never talked on the phone. I tried to explain that I trusted her, but another friend, Lucy, jumped to my defense, saying Ryan should just be supportive. That led to a bit of an argument between them, which I think damaged our group dynamic. I did my best to smooth things over. I kept trying to bring Amanda, now my girlfriend, into my friend group. She finally agreed to join us for a game night, but Ryan said he couldn't make it, so we were down one person. I figured we'd catch up with him later. Playing with Amanda and my friends was a blast at first. She was shy and didn't talk much to them, but they made an effort to include her. However, Seth, the friend who was suspicious, started asking Amanda all these probing questions, almost like he was trying to trip her up. He kept pushing, trying to find inconsistencies in her stories, but she either explained herself well or apologized for any confusion. After a few rounds of this, I told Seth to back off, that he was being rude, so he left the game. It was just me, Amanda, and 2 other friends, but we still had fun. Amanda even started to open up, joking around with them. It felt like she was really becoming part of the group, and we were all having a good time. I just hoped Seth would come around eventually so all of us could play together and become an unstoppable team. I even started thinking about meeting up in person. I learned that Amanda actually lived relatively close to me, just about an hour away. Things got even more serious between us, though we still hadn't talked on the phone. She did send me a voice recording once, saying she loved me, and I thought it was the sweetest thing. Amanda explained that she played from a computer at the local library and didn't have a phone. She lived with her parents because she had a disability that made it hard for her to work, and they didn't have much money. She told me her mom would drop her off at the library every day so she could have some time to herself, away from home. Looking back, maybe I was a fool to believe it, but at the time, it made sense. I really wanted to take things to the next level and meet her in person. I asked if I could visit her, but she seemed uneasy about it. I offered to come to her place so she wouldn't have to worry about any costs, but she was still nervous and said she'd think about it. I agreed, figuring maybe I was pushing too fast, so I didn't bring it up again. But then things started to get weird. Seth finally warmed up to the idea of Amanda and joined us for another game night, but Lucy was still a no-show, claiming she had to work late. We decided to play a trivia game where you could either click or type in your answers, so talking wasn't necessary. While the rest of us were in the game's voice chat, Amanda stuck to using text chat. Amanda blew us away with her knowledge of astronomy and old history, and we joked that her astronomy expertise might finally give Lucy some competition, as Lucy was usually unbeatable in those categories. Then, after one of the questions was answered, someone made a joke, and Amanda responded with a perfect comeback. The problem was, the joke was an inside joke within our group, something she couldn't have known about unless she was there when it happened. I hadn't told her about it either. At first, we all laughed, but then Seth asked if I'd shared that joke with her before. I was caught off guard. It did seem strange, but I must have mentioned it to her at some point, right? So I just said, yeah, probably, and Amanda agreed, and the rest of the night felt off. Amanda didn't talk much, and Seth seemed distant. After we finished playing, Seth said he wanted to talk to me privately. We got on the phone, and he apologized for how he'd acted earlier, but shared his concerns. He asked if I had really told Amanda about that joke, and I honestly couldn't remember. Seth then started pointing out all the odd things about Amanda, how she never wanted to talk on the phone, how she kept avoiding meeting in person, and especially how she knew about the joke. I tried to stay calm and explained that I had approached her in the game first, not the other way around. But Seth reminded me that she was the one who spoke first, asking a question she knew I could answer. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't starting to have doubts. I told him I'd bring it up with her and apologized for being harsh earlier. I decided to test her to see if something was really off. The next day when we talked, I brought up a story, something I hadn't shared with her before. As I was telling her about it, she mentioned a detail she couldn't have known. My mind started racing. Was this really happening? Had I been played this whole time? And if so, who was behind it all? I needed to confront her. I was already freaking myself out, and honestly, I was heartbroken. I had truly fallen for her, or at least the idea of her. So I told her that I really wanted to meet in person, that it was important for our relationship to move forward. She seemed upset and begged for more time, but I didn't back down. I don't know what came over me, but I decided to tell her my concerns. I brought up the joke from our game night and how certain things didn't make sense. She started getting defensive, and I saw a side of her I hadn't seen before. Her messages became erratic, short, and disjointed. She started saying how much she loved me, that she'd loved me for years, but I never gave her a chance. I was confused. We'd only known each other for a few months. What did she mean by years? Panic set in, and I pressed her to explain, but she wouldn't. She kept blaming me, saying I should have just let things be. I asked her to tell me who she really was, hoping maybe we could work things out, start fresh. But she wouldn't. Her last message said it could never work between us. It hinted at something dark, like she was considering ending her life, and then she said goodbye. I was shattered. She wouldn't reply after that, and I had no other way to contact her. I knew her last name, but nothing about her family. I tried searching online for someone with her name and location, but it was like she didn't exist. It only made me more certain that wasn't her real name. In the back of my mind, a dark thought crept in. What if my actions had led to someone's death? I couldn't forgive myself for that. Even if everything had been a lie, maybe I should have left it alone. I told my friends about what happened, and they tried to comfort me, saying I couldn't blame myself. Seth, ever the skeptic, said it was probably just another way to manipulate me. That got me thinking. Maybe he was right. I confronted them, and their reaction made me wonder, could this all have been part of their plan? But then Jake got defensive, saying Seth was being heartless. I tried to explain that Seth had a point, but Jake got angry, acting like we had insulted him. It felt out of character for him. But then something clicked. A couple of years before all this, Jake had confessed to me in person that he had feelings for me and asked me out. I was honest with him, telling him I didn't feel the same way. He was a close friend, and I wasn't interested in guys. Instead of accepting it, he got defensive, trying to justify why we should be together. But it wasn't going to work. You can't force someone to like you, especially when you're trying to convince a girl who isn't into guys. After that, he distanced himself for a while, making things awkward in our friend group. Eventually he came back and things seemed to return to normal. But every now and then, he'd drop a flirty comment, which I'd brush off, and he'd get defensive again. So when he got defensive during our conversation about Amanda, something felt off. I had known Seth the longest, and he was the only one I had told about Jake's confession. After the conversation ended, I confided in Seth about my suspicions. I told him I planned to ask Jake about it the next day and left it at that. What I didn't expect was a flood of messages between Seth and Jake overnight. To my shock, Seth had confronted Jake, and yeah, Jake pretty much admitted to everything. Jake messaged me, but instead of a real apology, he blamed me, saying it was all my fault for not giving him a chance. Seth sent me screenshots of their conversation, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt completely betrayed. I had opened up to Amanda, shared my feelings with her. She seemed nothing like Jake. Her words, her pictures, everything felt real. But it turns out the pictures were of his older sister's friend. He had flirted with her just to get them. That week was a nightmare for me. Not only did I lose someone I thought was a girlfriend, but I also lost a friend I had known for years. I couldn't bring myself to talk to or see Jake ever again. He just couldn't accept our friendship and ended up destroying it by pushing for something that would never happen. It took me a long time to move past this, and since then, I've been wary of talking to new people online. I might make small talk, but I never take it offline. My trust was shattered, so that's my story, and I hope it serves as a warning to others. Be careful who you trust online, and always do your homework. Or at least have a friend like Seth who can see through the lies. I had been on my own for a good bit when this all went down. Didn't really bother me though. I was enjoying the single life. I'd meet women through apps or get set up by friends. That's how I crossed paths with Lily. She worked with a buddy of mine, Clara. Clara had dragged me to this work event as her +1 since we were close friends. We'd tried dating once, but it never went anywhere, so we just stayed pals. Clara noticed me eyeing Lily that night. Lily was striking, tall, with this wild curly red hair and deep green eyes. She had this way about her that just pulled people in, super outgoing. She even joked about how people always called her Ariel because, well, she kinda looked like the mermaid. We laughed about it, and later that evening, Clara called me out on my not-so-subtle glances. I couldn't deny it. She said she'd play Cupid and talk to Lily at work the next day. Turns out, Lily was into me too. Clara handed her my number, and Lily hit me up right away. The chat flowed easily between us. We talked about our jobs, hobbies, the usual. We agreed to meet up that weekend for a proper date. The night of our date was awesome. We met at this restaurant that also had a bar and an arcade, the whole deal. Dinner was great, but it was the arcade that really got us laughing. She showed up in these sleek black pants and a cute top, but instead of heels, she wore sneakers. She laughed and told me not to judge her shoes. She wanted to be comfy while we played. The night just got better from there. We had a few drinks, her more than me, and as the night went on, she got a little more flirty and bold. Not that I was complaining. After a few hours of fun, she suggested heading back to her place, and I didn't hesitate. She had taken a cab earlier, but since I had driven, I offered to take us. I kept it light on the drinks, knowing I'd have to drive. When we pulled up to her place, just as she was about to open the door, she mentioned her nickname at work again and asked if I remembered. I nodded, curious. Then she said there was more to why she liked being called Ariel than just her appearance, and she was excited to show me. I assumed maybe she was into collecting mermaid figurines or something. No big deal, right? Everyone's got their thing. My brother still has a whole shelf of old comic books, and I've kept a few action figures from childhood. Nothing weird about it. But when she flipped on the light, I realized this was way more than a simple collection. Every wall, every shelf, was packed with dolls. Some were Barbies, others were different types of dolls, and there were even porcelain ones scattered around. I was taken aback for a second. She noticed my reaction and just laughed, saying she absolutely loved them. She loved fixing them up too, apparently. She told me how she had a whole workshop set up in her spare room where she repaired broken dolls, sometimes even making a decent side income from it. I mean, sure, it wasn't what I expected, but hey, everyone has their quirks, right? It wasn't a deal breaker for me, though. Lily was cool in so many ways, so I wasn't gonna let this freak me out. But then she mentioned that her most treasured dolls were in her workshop and that they were super special to her. She led me to the room, and again, dolls were everywhere, lining the shelves near the ceiling. These ones were all porcelain, and she referred to them as her family. She started introducing them to me, one by one. There was one named after her mom, another after her dad, her grandparents, and even one for her old school teacher. She even had dolls named after two of her exes. Then she showed me a picture hanging on the wall of her sister and pointed out a doll that looked almost identical. Same shoulder-length hair, curly and light brown, blue eyes, and even a small mole above the left eye, just like in the photo. The doll was even dressed in the same outfit her sister had worn in the picture. She mentioned how her sister had tossed out the dress, so she snatched it up and sewed it into a tiny replica for the doll. She went on about how she still had a soft spot for her exes, which is why she turned them into dolls as well. Then she laughed and said she couldn't wait to make one for me. I knew she was trying to be playful, maybe even a little funny, but it gave me the chills. It felt like someone admitting they wanted to make a voodoo doll of you. I couldn't think of anything else, so I just let out an awkward laugh. She noticed and quickly shifted back to the version of Lily I had met earlier that night. She kissed me and whispered that her bedroom was the best spot in the whole house, then led me to another room with the door closed. I just hoped, really hoped, that it wasn't full of more dolls. When she opened the door, I was relieved. There were no dolls on the walls, dressers, or shelves. Nothing. I finally let myself relax. I even started feeling guilty, like maybe I was overreacting. I mean, sure, it was weird to me, but if it made her happy, who was I to judge? But then I tried to lie down on her bed and felt something underneath the blanket. Instinctively, I jumped back, not wanting to break whatever it was. Lily giggled and leaned over to pull the blanket back, revealing a nearly life-sized doll lying there, grinning up at me. I'm just over 6 feet, and this thing had to be at least 4 or 5 feet tall. Lily started telling me all about the doll, giving it a name, a backstory, and then explained why it was in her bed in the first place. I'll let you connect the dots on that one. She even suggested we could include it in whatever we had planned for the night. I tried my best to be polite and told her it just wasn't my thing. But instead of understanding, she got upset. She said her dolls were like her kids, her whole world, and if I wanted to be with her, I'd have to accept them too. That was it for me. I grabbed my stuff, made up some excuse, and walked out of her apartment, trying to make sense of what I'd just experienced. The next day, she sent me a message with a picture of herself and the doll from her bed, saying I was welcome back if I ever changed my mind. I couldn't imagine doing anything in that apartment with all those eyes staring at me. I hadn't even checked the bathroom, but I wouldn't have been surprised if she had some dolls in there too. Luckily, Lily made things easy with Clara. She told her that we just didn't click, so I didn't have to share my weird experience. And honestly, I don't think I ever will, outside of telling you guys on the internet. So, I hope you enjoyed hearing about my incredibly unsettling and awkward first date. I have this bizarre story about online dating that still makes me feel uneasy. It's more odd than anything, really. It was just a really weird interaction with a guy who seemed pretty normal at first. I'll try to keep it short, but sorry if it drags on. This all went down when I was knee-deep in the world of dating apps. Like a lot of people, I was searching for something more. I'd been single for almost 5 years and just wanted to find someone who wasn't a total weirdo, someone I could actually enjoy hanging out with. If it turned into something more, cool. So I ended up matching with this guy who seemed decent. For the sake of this story, let's call him Dan. Dan seemed like a pretty solid guy. His profile had this geeky vibe to it, and his sense of humor really clicked with mine. Our chats flowed easily, we had a lot in common, and liked a bunch of the same stuff. Eventually, we decided to take the plunge and meet up in person. I was actually pretty excited, thinking this could be the start of something good. Like a lot of people, we decided to meet at a coffee shop, a safe, neutral spot where, if nothing else, we could enjoy a cup of coffee and then part ways if it didn't work out. I got there first, and Dan texted me that he was on his way but would be a few minutes late. No worries, stuff happens. I just sat there with my mocha, scrolling through our old chats, laughing at some of the jokes we'd shared, and thinking about what to talk about when he arrived. This is usually the part where people say the person didn't look anything like their pictures. But nope, not this time. Dan actually looked exactly like he did in his photos. But there was something off about him that I couldn't quite put my finger on. At that moment, though, I just shrugged it off as nerves or something. He ordered his coffee, and I already had mine in hand, but I hadn't touched it much. We sat down at a cozy little table, and the conversation kept flowing, almost like it did in our messages. It felt pretty natural at first, but then Dan started asking some questions that felt off. He seemed unusually curious about my daily life, and the questions he asked were oddly specific. He wanted to know what time I usually walked my dog, whether I ever felt scared living alone, and even how much I paid for rent. What really creeped me out was how he looked at me whenever he asked these questions. His expression would shift from casual to this intense, almost unsettling stare, like he was trying to size me up or something. It felt like he was trying to intimidate me, but only during certain questions. Later on, I found out that this is some kind of so-called alpha male trick to make women feel small. But honestly, it's laughable that anyone thinks that works. I tried to steer the conversation back to safer, more neutral topics, hoping I could still salvage the date somehow. But whenever I asked him about his hobbies or interests, anything that could make for harmless small talk, he dodged the questions. He would be really vague, refusing to share much about himself, and kept trying to turn the conversation back to me, pressing me with more questions. It was becoming clear that he was playing some kind of manipulative game. I've seen this kind of behavior before, and all the warning signs were there. At some point, I don't remember exactly how we got there, Dan started talking about one of his exes. He casually mentioned how he used to monitor her online activities and would randomly show up at her workplace to check in on her. The way he spoke, it was like he didn't see anything wrong with it, like it was just something normal guys do. He even said with a smirk that he used to think she was the one, but that she couldn't handle him when he was at his best. Yeah, a lot of red flags were popping up during this conversation. The entire time he talked about his ex, there wasn't a shred of regret or any understanding that what he did was invasive and creepy. If anything, he seemed kind of proud of it. The final nail in the coffin was when Dan joked about having used a fake profile to dig up more information about me before our date. He then told me that when we matched a few weeks ago, he'd sent me a friend request using a different profile, and I accepted it without even thinking twice. That was on me. He admitted that he had combed through my Facebook, learning everything he could about me, and casually mentioned that he had even been near my neighborhood. That's when it all clicked. Earlier, when I got that uneasy feeling about him, it was because I had actually seen him in person before. Just the day before our date, in fact. When I was leaving for work that morning, I noticed a guy walking down my street. He waved as I was getting into my car, but I didn't think much of it, too focused on getting to the office on time. It didn't hit me then that it was Dan. He had, for lack of a better word, stalked me before our date. The way he told me about it, you'd think he expected me to be flattered or something. I wasn't. I quickly made up an excuse, telling him that I had a lot to do and needed to cut the date short. I mumbled something vague about having to meet up with my mom later, not even bothering to come up with a solid story. Dan didn't seem the least bit bothered. He just kept smiling that confident smile, asking if he could walk me to my car, or maybe join me for whatever I had planned. I politely turned him down, told him to enjoy his coffee, and then bolted out of there. I hurried to my car and got out of the parking lot as fast as I could without breaking any speed limits. But the creepiest part of all this? A few hours later, he texted me. "I think we really connected today," he wrote, "and I feel like you could make me really happy. Let me know when you're free, and I'll take you somewhere much nicer than that coffee shop." I didn't even bother replying. Ghosting him seemed like the safest option at that point. I guess his overblown ego and narcissism kept him from reaching out again, because I never heard from him after that. This whole experience is a chilling reminder that some people out there are just plain weird. Not just guys, but people in general. Dan seemed totally normal at first, but he turned out to be anything but. Since then, I've gone on a few more online dates, but nothing has really clicked. And honestly, I'm fine with that. I'd rather have a bunch of forgettable, boring dates than deal with another Dan in my life. Around the autumn of 2021, I decided to meet up with a guy named Marcus. We had matched on a dating app, and after chatting for nearly a month, we finally planned a night out. We agreed on a cozy little diner not far from my place. I put on one of my go-to dresses, did my hair and makeup just right, and was really looking forward to what I hoped would be an amazing evening. When I got there, I saw him waiting by the door, and he was quite the sight. Marcus had on a deep blue suit, paired with a crisp white shirt. His dark brown hair and striking blue eyes really made him stand out in the dim evening light. As I walked up to him, I gave him a compliment, which he quickly returned with a smile. We got seated, ordered our meals, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. The date was going smoothly, but I became even more excited when Marcus brought up this old, deserted factory he knew of. We had discovered early on that we both had a passion for urban exploration, or urbex as we called it. We shared stories of the abandoned places we'd explored, exchanged photos, and talked about finding a spot we could explore together. So, when he mentioned this factory, I was immediately intrigued. Now, I know what you're thinking. Most people would probably hesitate to meet a stranger in an abandoned place, but for those of us into urbex, it's part of the thrill. So, when Marcus offered to take me there, I didn't hesitate. Once dinner was over, we headed out to our cars, with me following him in mine. I always kept a pair of boots and some old jeans in my trunk, so I quickly changed into something more practical. Marcus, however, stayed in his suit, which I found a bit odd. I joked about it, asking if he really planned to explore in that outfit. But he just shrugged it off, saying he didn't mind. When we arrived, Marcus led the way to the entrance. The building had once been a large manufacturing plant, and it was clear it had been left to decay for years. He gave the door a hard shove with his shoulder, and after a loud creak, it swung open. I jumped a bit at the sound, worried someone might hear us and call the cops. The factory was in a part of town that was slowly being redeveloped, so I figured it was only a matter of time before it was torn down to make way for new condos or something. But after glancing around and seeing no one, I followed Marcus inside and he closed the door behind us. By now, it was pretty dark outside, so Marcus pulled out his phone to light the way. I grabbed a small flashlight I always kept on my keychain, and we started making our way through the factory. As we moved deeper into the building, I noticed the old, faded wallpaper peeling off in long strips. A dusty reception desk sat abandoned, with a few old visitor badges scattered on top. Each room we passed had toys and playsets shoved into one corner, as if someone had hastily tried to clean up but never finished. It made me wonder why everything was left behind. Did they relocate to another building? And if so, why leave all this stuff? If they shut down for good, why not donate the toys instead of letting them rot here? It always bothers me to see perfectly good things go to waste when they could help someone else. But as we kept walking, something else caught my eye. The chairs, whether they were small ones for kids or regular folding chairs, were all lined up facing the walls. It was strange because the walls were completely blank, just slightly discolored where something like a whiteboard might have once hung. At first, I just thought it was odd, but after seeing the same setup in a few more rooms, I couldn't shake the weird feeling it gave me. So, I pointed it out to Marcus. He grinned and said, "Yeah, it looks pretty strange without the full story." That made me pause. "What do you mean by without the full story?" I asked, suddenly feeling uneasy. Marcus just smiled again, took my hand, and said there was something he wanted to show me. He led me down a hallway to a glass door that was either covered with paper or had been painted over so you couldn't see through it. It was hard to tell in the dark, but there was a strange glow coming from behind the door, like something was shining through whatever was covering it. I stopped a few steps away from the door and pulled my hand out of his. Marcus turned to look at me, his face concerned. "You okay?" he asked. I admitted that I was starting to feel creeped out. His earlier comment about context had made me suspicious, and now this glowing door was making me question everything. I was beginning to regret coming here, realizing I'd probably made a mistake. Marcus noticed my hesitation and gave me that soft smile again. He assured me that everything was fine and that he wasn't going to hurt me. "I promise," he said. "Nothing's going to happen to you. I just want to show you what I found in here last time I came." Looking back, I should have turned and walked out right then. I should have run while he was still a few steps away. Who knows what was waiting behind that door? But for some reason, I felt like I could trust him. He seemed so genuine, never pushy or forceful, and up until now, I'd been the one leading the way. Marcus held my hand gently as we walked toward the room, but it was more of a light touch than a tight grip. He let go as soon as I pulled away, which made me think, in hindsight, why people were so drawn to him. He was easy on the eyes, sure, but there was something about his calm demeanor and the way he spoke that made him so persuasive. So, despite my nerves, I followed him. We reached the door, and he asked if I was ready. I gave a hesitant nod, and he slowly pushed the door open. What I saw inside was the last thing I expected. The floor was covered in candles and old books, arranged in a way that looked almost ritualistic. About a dozen people were sitting on the ground, legs crossed, holding hands with their eyes closed. They were all dressed the same, men in dark red suits, women in matching robes with hoods. It took me a second to realize they were all wearing outfits similar to Marcus's. Standing in the center of the group was a man, smiling at us as we entered. He seemed to be the leader. I was starting to wonder what exactly I had walked into. The man in the middle welcomed us in a soft, soothing voice that made the others slowly turn their heads toward us. Marcus immediately dropped to his knees and greeted the man, calling him something I can't quite remember now. He then introduced me, saying my name like he was presenting me to someone important. The man reached out his hands, and not wanting to seem rude or cause a scene, I offered mine for a handshake. but instead of shaking it, he held my hand between both of his, gently stroking it as he welcomed me, saying I was always invited to join them. He began talking about their mission, something about how they were the Earth's true caretakers. They found abandoned places like this one and used them for their rituals, offering the space back to the planet in some sort of spiritual exchange. Curious despite my growing unease, I asked how they gave it back, and the man's smile widened as he replied, "We baptize it, child." Then he asked if I wanted to join their prayer, saying that experiencing it firsthand would help me understand their purpose, and maybe even come to love it. Everyone in the room was staring at me, waiting for my answer, and although nothing overtly threatening was happening, I couldn't shake the fear that was creeping up on me. His words were clear, but the way he spoke made everything feel like it had a hidden meaning. I started to feel lightheaded and hunched over slightly, telling Marcus that I felt sick and needed some fresh air. He rubbed my back gently, reassuring me that he would take me outside and let the others know he'd be back soon. Once we were outside, I didn't waste a second. I sprinted to my car, jumped in, and locked the doors behind me. Marcus didn't yell or run after me. He just slowly walked up to my car, his calm demeanor making me question whether I had overreacted. I cracked my window just enough to talk to him, keeping my engine running in case I needed to make a quick getaway. Marcus leaned in, asking if I was all right. Feeling a bit more secure with the car between us, I demanded to know what the hell was going on, and if he thought this was some kind of joke. He just smiled that same calm smile and explained that these people were his chosen family. He assured me they wouldn't hurt me, that everyone there was there by choice, and that their mission was simply to return abandoned places back to the Earth. He went on about how humans take land, build whatever we want, and then leave these structures to decay when we no longer need them. He said their goal was to ask for the Earth's forgiveness and give these places back. When I asked what he meant by baptizing a building, his smile grew, and he explained that it was up to the Earth to decide how to reclaim the space. Sometimes, he said, the building might collapse, get overtaken by nature, or even flood or catch fire. I was getting nervous now, and I asked if they were setting these places on fire themselves. Marcus chuckled and shook his head, saying they never physically touched the buildings. It was all up to the Earth's will after their prayers. Then he mentioned that since I was into exploring abandoned places, he thought I might want to witness one of their prayers firsthand. I told him I'd think about it, but that I needed to go. He just smiled, waved, and told me goodbye, without any sign of frustration. I wasn't sure if that made me feel better or worse. When I got home, I called my friend immediately and told her about the insane date I'd just been on. She agreed it was crazy and suggested we look into any abandoned places that had been mysteriously destroyed recently. I have to admit, I was curious. We found one building, empty for nearly 2 years, that had been bought by someone planning to turn it into an indoor sports complex. But just a few months before our date, a pipe burst, flooding the entire place and making it unsalvageable. The owners had no choice but to demolish it. We kept digging and found another case in a neighboring state. This building had been sitting vacant for a few years, but when I visited it a while back, it seemed structurally sound. Then, out of nowhere, one side of the building collapsed, and the city decided to tear it down for safety reasons. As we kept searching, comparing notes on places we'd explored, we found several more examples of abandoned buildings meeting similar fates. And while I can't prove anything, it made me wonder if there was a connection. I'm not religious, and I don't really believe in the paranormal, but this whole situation had me questioning things. Was this group actually doing something to make these buildings fall apart? Or was I just starting to sound as crazy as they were? Or could it all be a coincidence? And before you ask, no, I didn't go to the police. I mean, what would I even say? I broke into an abandoned building and found a group of people who pray to the Earth, and now I think they might be responsible for some natural disasters? They'd probably just laugh and maybe even arrest me for trespassing. So no, I didn't report it. When Marcus later asked me if I wanted to go out again, I politely declined, and thankfully, he never contacted me again. But now, whenever my friends and I go exploring, I can't help but feel a little on edge. And when something strange happens to one of the buildings we've been to, I get even more suspicious. A few years back, I dipped my toes into the world of dating apps, hoping to find someone to share my time with. I wasn't entirely ready to settle down, but I knew I was after more than just a casual fling. It was pretty handy to be able to weed out people who weren't looking for anything serious. In my swiping, I stumbled upon a woman named Marcy. Marcy had this stunning olive skin, jet black hair, and piercing eyes. She struck the perfect balance of being funny, outgoing, and a bit of a badass. Her profile was packed with photos, and she told me stories of how she'd traveled across the country and even to a few other continents. There were pictures of her scaling cliffs, riding camels through the desert, and even swimming with sharks. She mentioned that all these adventures were part of her old job, which she had to leave behind due to some health issues. I figured even if things didn't pan out romantically, I'd have a great friend with incredible stories to share. So, it's safe to say we'd been talking for a good while. We went from texting to phone calls and eventually video chatting. I had no reason to doubt she was who she said she was. Marcy, the adventurous globetrotter. I was eager to meet her in person, but about a month into our conversations, when I brought it up, she turned me down, saying she wasn't able to at the time, but would love to meet soon. It didn't bother me at first since she kept in touch, so I figured it wasn't because she wasn't interested. But then, one morning while I was at work, she texted me out of the blue, asking what I was up to that day. It was early in the week, and she knew I worked a typical 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, so it was odd. Still, I didn't want to be rude, so I replied that I was at work and asked what was on her mind. She then asked if I wanted to meet up at her place, offering to make us lunch. We had talked about where we lived and where I worked before, so I knew she lived nearby. Meeting for a first date at her place seemed a bit unusual, but at the same time, the fact that she didn't want to go all out at some fancy restaurant made me think she was pretty down to earth, which I appreciated. So, I said yes. I figured at worst I'd have a long lunch break, but it seemed worth the risk. But when I pulled up to Marcy's place, I was immediately taken aback. The house looked like it was holding on by a thread, barely standing against the wind. There was a makeshift wooden fence awkwardly patched together around an old chain-link one. From a distance, the windows seemed to be covered up with cardboard or plywood from the inside. The paint, which must have once been a bright blue, was now chipped and peeling away, revealing dull gray panels beneath. The front porch looked like it hadn't seen a repair in years, all splintered and warped. The whole place just screamed neglect. I started to wonder if this was some kind of setup. Had I done something to deserve this? My mind was racing, but I tried to stay calm. I decided to give her a call to double-check the address, hoping I had just made a mistake. Marcy picked up, sounding as cheerful as ever, and confirmed that I was at the right place. She said she'd meet me at the front door. I pulled into the driveway, and as I stepped out of the car, the same woman from the photos appeared at the door. She looked a bit more relaxed than I expected. No makeup, her hair pulled up into a messy bun, but she still looked good. I've always appreciated women who are confident enough to go natural, so I tried to push my doubts aside. Maybe she just couldn't afford to fix the place up, or maybe she didn't have the time or energy to do it. Whatever the reason, it wasn't a deal-breaker for me. Surely the inside would be better, right? I wish I could say I was right, but honestly, I wasn't prepared for what I walked into. It was pitch dark inside. As soon as we stepped through the door, I realized the lights were off. I expected Marcy to flick a switch, but instead, she apologized and mentioned that she didn't have power. I had no idea how to react to that, so I just muttered, "Oh, okay," as I glanced around. My eyes adjusted enough to make out a single candle flickering on what I guessed was a coffee table. That's when things started to get weird. She explained that she refused to use electricity in her home because she believed it was part of a government scheme. According to her, the government used electrical waves to control people, not just through TV or screens, but by directly messing with their minds. As she led me to the kitchen, she went on about how she used to work for the government and had seen some really disturbing things. That's why she quit, because she started feeling sick, convinced they were targeting her since she knew too much. Now, she only charged her phone, laptop, and tablet when she was out at the library or a nearby coffee shop. She mentioned that she was okay using these devices at home in small doses, as the real danger was when they were plugged in. But even then, she only used them in her closet, which she had covered in some sort of protective film she got from a guy online. I swear, I couldn't have made this stuff up if I tried. At this point, my mind started to drift as I scanned her kitchen. It was still dark, but there were several large candles scattered around the table and more lining the countertops. She even had one lit right next to a little gas camping stove where she was cooking what I assumed was our lunch. That's when my discomfort really set in. How had she managed to hide this side of herself so well? She had seemed so normal throughout all our conversations. Where was this coming from? And why hadn't she mentioned any of this before? In her situation, why not find someone on some kind of conspiracy theorist dating site instead? I mean, we were both in our late 30s and still single. So, it's not like either of us had been having a ton of luck. Why not just be upfront about something that big? It seemed like a pretty major detail, right? Maybe I'm being a jerk, but this was just way too much for me. I didn't want to stick around long enough to find out if she was right about the government or if she was just nuts. So, I made up an excuse, asking if I could use the bathroom. She pointed it out to me with a smile, and I walked as calmly as I could, but inside, I was freaking out. Once in the bathroom, I quietly pulled out my phone and texted a buddy from work who knew where I was. I told him I needed a quick exit and asked him to call me in 5 minutes, telling me there was an emergency at the office. That way, I'd have a solid reason to leave without looking like a complete jerk. I put my phone away, flushed the toilet, and washed my hands, silently thanking whatever forces existed that she at least had running water. But when I opened the door, I almost jumped out of my skin. She was standing right there, holding a single candle. I barely stopped myself from screaming. Instead, I tried to laugh it off, telling her she'd scared me. She didn't move, though, just stood there, staring at me without breaking eye contact. Then, without even blinking, she asked me what I was doing on my phone. I played dumb, pretending I hadn't been on my phone, but she wasn't buying it. She claimed she could sense the electricity being used. I was floored. How could she possibly know that? Reluctantly, I came clean, sort of, and told her that my coworker had texted me, saying there was an urgent issue at the office, so I needed to head back. I tried to convince her I'd come back later, but she wasn't having it. Her face twisted in the dim candlelight, and I could see her getting angrier by the second. I had a feeling this wasn't the first time someone had tried to bail on her. I wanted to avoid escalating things, so I reached out to gently touch her arm, hoping to calm her down and maybe get past her since she was blocking my way. But she jerked back, shouting something like, "You're just like all the rest!" I didn't notice at first, but she was holding a frying pan in her other hand, and suddenly she raised it above her head, ready to strike. I barely managed to slam the bathroom door shut, just as she swung. The pan thudded against the door repeatedly. I was trapped and starting to panic. There was no way this would end well for me. I was in her house, and my chances weren't looking good. The only way out was the bathroom window, and to my surprise, it wasn't nailed shut or blocked by anything weird. I managed to push it open, and thankfully, it was a single-story house. I squeezed through the window into the backyard, hearing her still screaming inside. I bolted around the side of the house, sprinting towards my car. As I reached it and fumbled for the keys, I saw her burst out the front door, still clutching the frying pan. I threw the car into reverse, but before I could fully pull out, there was a loud bang. She'd hurled the pan at my car. I sped off, glancing in the rearview mirror to see her still shouting and pointing at me. I didn't slow down until I was back at work, parking far in the back lot, hoping she wouldn't show up looking for my car. Once I finally caught my breath, I stepped out to inspect the damage. Sure enough, there was a nice dent where the pan had hit. I groaned, thinking about how much that would cost to fix. When I got inside, I found my coworker and told him the whole crazy story. He laughed, saying I should call the cops for the damage, joking that I'd missed his call. He thought it was hilarious, but he also pointed out that I could press charges to make her pay for the repairs. The thought crossed my mind, but I decided against it. It just felt like it would make things even worse for both of us. I figured I'd just eat the cost and chalk it up as a lesson learned. From now on, I'd only meet dates in public places, and maybe I'd start being more honest if I wasn't feeling it.